Emily Palmer is joining us here from Beck's Funeral Home in Edmonds, and she's going to talk to us about the sorts of records that she, as a member of the team at Beck's, works with, and how we can possibly work with them.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm Emily Palmer, and I'm glad to be here tonight. Can you hear? Am I good with me louder or something? I need to talk louder.
Probably.
Okay, is that better? Okay, I'm Emily Palmer, and I worked at Beck's Tribute Center in Edmonds for about a year and a half. Yeah, a little over a year and a half, probably. And Amber Lynn is my boss. She is like the whole boss of the whole place in Edmonds, and she's here because I was scared that you guys would ask me questions I didn't know the answer to. So she's my expert, and she's letting me be the talker. So until there's a question, that she's really smart about everything. Let's see, I'm the lead admin, and Beck's is a full service funeral home. Let's put it on that slide. Beck's Tribute Center is a full service funeral home who has been serving its community for more than 65 years. We also own our own crematory as well as the Restlawn Memorial Park Cemetery. And Amber Lynn's my boss. And we've been asked to discuss death documentation and how it relates to genealogical research. I kind of have a feeling that you guys know more about this than I do, but I do know a little bit about death certificates. So I'll just I thought that we would look into the process, like what it takes to make a death certificate and all of the different steps and how that gets certified then. I would discuss each of the components of the demographic information. And then we'll kind of talk about how to look for using that information, some clues in the data, and do some detective work. And then what about missing data? Sometimes there just aren't death certificates for what you're looking for. And what does that mean? And are there options? And maybe there are certificates. There's just a different way to find it. And then I'll just touch a little bit on ordering a death certificate because it varies, as we discussed before the meeting, that it varies, requirements vary state by state. And then I have a few handouts, and I'll kind of let them speak for themselves. I'll just kind of hand them out and kind of talk through them briefly. Some of them are pretty cool. I just wanted you guys to have more information than what I wanted to blab all night about. And then questions, will open it up. And if I don't know, I'll be like the test of the night. If I don't know, then I have Amber here that she might just butt in. So I love that. So anyway, without further ado, I guess we will just keep digging in. So, vital statistics in the United States. I'm just going to read because I didn't memorize all this. All the states and a few U.S. cities and territories have a Bureau of Department of Vital and Health Statistics, which oversees creation and distribution of birth, marriage, and death records. Most states did not start consistently keeping uniform vital records until the early 1900s as a way to track American mortality rates. In 1953, the National Office of Vital Statistics was created as a way for the federal government to collect and publish national vital statistics. It was a precursor to today's Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the HHS. And as we know, vital records can tell a family story. Birth, marriage, and death records are instrumental in learning more about your ancestors and their life stories, particularly for your family who lived during the last 100 years when civil authorities began standardizing vital records. These records are full of personal details that not only paint a more vibrant picture of their lives, but can also lead to additional family history discoveries. Since we are from Beck's, tonight we'll be discussing the death certificate. And so we'll talk about documenting death. What is or why do we need a death certificate? The IRS may disagree, but the death certificate is arguably the most important legal document in existence. It is the only legal proof that someone has died. Death certificates may sound grim, but they're also filled with details that can lead to exciting discoveries about your family history. Okay. Okay, thanks. I'm trying to get through it. Okay, so documenting death, there's a process. A fully executed death certificate will contain signatures from several individuals. So prior to issuing a certified death certificate, authorities require various steps to be taken to validate the cause of death and the identity of the deceased. The pronouncer will attest that the death has occurred. This could be a hospice nurse, hospital personnel, and sometimes a coroner or medical examiner. It is often my job to begin the death certificate process at Beck's. When we get a call that we have a case, the death certificate system within the state is in what's called Electronic Death Registry System, EDRS. And that is the state of Washington's way to everybody who dies gets entered into that. Well, funeral home personnel or hospital personnel or the medical examiner are the three entities, probably the three entities that can enter in the death information once a person passes. And so for that person, all the demographics just start. So when I get a call from the hospital or sometimes from the medical examiner or a hospice nurse, those are the main three ways I get information. Then I would then pull up that thing on my computer and start asking all the questions. I cannot start a case without somebody having first pronounced someone the time of death. And that time of death and the date of death are two key things for me to have prior to a case being entered into the state as someone has passed. And so that's just somebody must pronounce. That's step one. The death has to occur. Somebody needs to pronounce it. Does that make sense? I kind of went off my little sheet here, but let's see. So once I've entered it into the EDRS system, the next step I have to do and know when the hospital or whoever is calling me is who would be the doctor that would certify the cause of death. So that becomes the certifier is the next step. And they have to, so the hospice nurse would tell me who the attending physician would be for the hospice facility or for a, an at-home passing, or the hospital would know, okay, he died in the ER and it's the ER's responsibility to tell you to have a doctor that would sign off on the cause of death. The cause of death is a very important key piece to having a death certificate. It's also fun, and we'll talk about this later, but in genealogy, it can build you a family history. If you go back and you can see there's several sections to it where it leads up to the cause of death. And so sometimes that can be a lot of other diseases that eventually cause the death. Or, those are just other things that the person suffered and I had 100% capacity to fight whatever it was that made them pass. So those are just some key components. Getting the doctors to sign off sometimes is a fun little game that we play. And I'm saying that sarcastically. Doctors are busy and oftentimes they're hard to get a hold of. They have so many hours with the state. Once I've assigned the doctor and the person, the time of death, then they get alerted by the state that, hey, there's somebody there that's been assigned to you to sign off on their certificate. They would then enter in all of the medical history and all the required portions that I don't have access to, and sign off on that. We can't go any further without that information. There's some other pieces of information though, and it becomes the funeral director's job, and the funeral facility is responsible then to meet with the family, the next of kin. It's called usually the informant. It is called the informant. Usually that's a next of kin, a spouse or a child of whoever has passed. Sometimes those people aren't available or it's been assigned to someone else. And so it doesn't have to be the next of kin. It can sometimes be a long lost cousin or friend Frank. There are legalities and we have to kind of go through a list. And sometimes it just happens that there isn't a next of kin family member that will sign off. And so we get information, the funeral directors like Amber would meet with the family and they get all the information on a form and they would bring it to me. I fill it out into the thing, submit it, create the case with the state, fill all that stuff out, print out what's called a working proof. And then we take it back to the informant and say, okay, everything on here needs to be correct because it gets filed with the state and then all kinds of other. So we'll look at the pieces here in a minute of what the informant gives, but it's pretty important that the informant understands and knows about this person and has this history. We really, really like it when a family has come in where they have pre-planned what their plans and their wishes. Part of that pre-planning process is a vital sheet, a vital stat sheet, has all the information we need to fill out the death certificate. And so when someone has pre-planned and pre-provided that information, it really helps even the kids who are grieving, or the spouse who is grieving and can't think straight and doesn't want to have to go find that or find this. It's already right there. So that's really fun for us to have that. Oh, that person pre-planned, we have this information. That's really helpful. So that's something to keep in mind if you ever even just have that form, fill it out and tuck it away somewhere with your stuff. It just makes life easier for your people that love you. Okay, so where'd we start? So we get all of that. And once we have, the doctor has signed off on it and the family has said, okay, all of this is to our knowledge, the best part is all correct, it looks good, then it is our responsibility to say, okay, this person is going to be buried, and they're going to be buried at the Edmonds Memorial Cemetery on October 28th. And so we would put all that information in, and the funeral director would be Amber Lynn, or whoever. We have 5 or 6 funeral directors, whichever one is handling this case, their information and their license numbers on there. And then it's my job to say, okay, we need to submit it to the state. We have everything. Then the deputy registrar, that would be the certifier, then down here, the vital records, deputy registrar, says, okay, all of this looks good. Or like last week, we had one where somebody didn't know the mother's name, the first name of the mother. They knew the last name, the mother's maiden name, but did not know the first. So it was unknown. They were also, the person was born in a state like Colorado or something, and but they didn't know where in the state. They just knew the state. And so the deputy registrar sent me a message. Are you verifying that we tried to get that information, but that information really was unknown? And so I'm just telling you kind of these little hints, because we'll talk about all of these little factors a little bit later here in a couple more slides. And so the deputy registrar sends me a message. I say, yeah, it's verified. The family does not know this. They don't know that. They just know Colorado. And then she signs off, and then we're able to get what's called the burial transit permit. It's also the certificate of, if they chose to be cremated, it would be the certificate of cremation. But the burial that paper from the state then says, okay, we're going to print off the death certificates. This is certified. Now you have your permits to be able to have the burial, or to transfer it out of state, or to do the cremation. So that's the BTP. That's big for me. Getting the BTP means all the steps have happened and we filed, and now they can proceed with whatever the family had wanted. Sometimes we have to wait on a doctor that's being stubborn, or he's out of town, or just other reasons why. And we've come really close to missing, a scheduled funeral, because we're trying, and we've tracked doctors down, and we get really good at it. And one of my coworkers that comes in on Thursdays and Fridays, she's amazing at it. She can track any doctor down. So anyway, we have our specialties, and sometimes we have, Shannon, just please help with that one. And she does. So, but there's sometimes that can be the big challenge. So, okay. So let's see. So we talked about that and getting the VTP. So now let's look at, oh, okay. Before we go into all of the details, let's do one more thing, just because, this is important too. So what happens with all the data? Okay. The information gets dispersed to various locations. So this is after the deputy registrar signed off. It's printed on these pretty little things, and it has a number, and it's official. Okay. So upon completion of the death certificate is registered with the town, the city, and the county of death. And so then it also goes, the registration results in the notification of the Social Security Administration. That's one of the biggest, the most often phone call I get is, when you did the death certificate, did that notify the Social Security? So we'll talk about that too when we talk about the details, but yes, that does happen. The state also receives the data and uses it for population statistics and disease, injury, mortality data. The state shares the data with and we talked about these initials earlier, the NCHS and the CDC. The cause of death data are recorded. National mortality statistics are then derived. Then, I just found this interesting. There's all these people that use this information. Federal government, local and state agencies use the data from death certificates for monitoring morbidity and mortality, scientific study, legislative change research, and funding prioritization, public health strategies, and public safety initiatives. Then the public health officials use death certificates to compile data on various statistics, including leading causes of death. The public health policies depend heavily on the mortality data from the death certificates because they are the only source of information about the causes of death and illnesses preceding to death. Government officials may need the death certificate to review the cause of death during investigations to determine if foul play occurred. Families will use it to close bank accounts, turn off utilities, insurance policies, retirement benefits, settle their affairs, et cetera, et cetera. And then the funeral facility, upon signing the death certificate, the deputy registrar issues the certificate of disposition of remains, also known as the burial or cremation permit. The crematories and the cemeteries require this form before they will cremate or bury a body. This form is combined with a transportation permit that allows the movement or shipment of a body. We call this form BTP. Okay, so now we'll go into the information. The demographics. The funeral facility and the informant work together to fill out the demographic data. So when meeting with families, the informant will be given, well, this is really the state gave me an image of a sample death certificate to use in this kind of situation. But we have a working copy. It doesn't look exactly like this, but it's kind of close. But anyway, we put arrows between the sections that we can contribute to. So anything above or below those two red arrows, I have no access to entering information. Like I cannot go in and change the time of death. Once it's entered once, the only person that could change that time of death would be a doctor or the ME. The medical examiner has complete authority over all of it. If it enters his jurisdiction, then he can change any component of that. So can the deputy registrar, but I don't know if the registrar can change the medical stuff. So it's way beyond us. We don't even know. We don't need to know. So that section is what we say to the families. Okay, we're going to collect this information, and that is the only information that we can change. That also contains our information that we would like Amber and her license number and the burial date and where the cemetery is, etc. So, so now the components that we look for need from the people about the decedent. So the legal name, and then also any aliases that they used. So not necessarily maiden, but like you would have Mickey Mouse, and he was also Willie Steamboat. And so he would be AKA Mickey Rodent Mouse. And then, his real name, Mickey Rodent, and last name Mouse, and then Steamboat Willie Mouse, or whatever. So there is a place for an AKA down on there as well. And it's very important that we get, the county, the date, the time, and location of death. That's on there. The decedent's sex and age. And then the social security number. And oftentimes people bring in a number, and then there's a little button I can click that says verify. And so it goes to the Social Security Administration, and it verifies that the person's name and the person's number and their date of birth all match. If those all match, then it passes. And that is the person that Social Security is notified that has passed once it's now certified by the state. Once the registrar puts that stamp of approval on it, Social Security Administration. So there's one little check for us. We can make sure that this person really is that. One time I had to, instead of use the person's name they were born with, they had decided to change their Social Security to match their name they were comfortable with. And so I had to actually pass it by changing their AKA into their legal name, their legal born with name into the AKA, and then it passed the Social Security. So like when I was, my maiden name is Mishler. So I have an Emily Mishler Social Security number card. But then when I got married, I became Emily Palmer. Well, I went to Social Security and got my card now that says Emily Palmer. When I die, I will need to be Emily Palmer, or if I ever go and change my name again and change it with Social Security. So it's whatever name is your Social Security name. sometimes people don't know where to find that. And I said, well, can you get one of their tax records? Oh, their social security's on there, and so with their name, that they use for that, because the IRS usually IRS is good at matching all of that too. So did I answer that? Did I say that? Okay, thanks.
Can an informant refuse to answer any of those questions?
The informant cannot know a lot of those, I guess they can refuse, but maybe then we would need a different informant, because this information does need to be submitted to the state. It's a legal requirement when someone dies. It's just part of life. And we're all given these identifying factors through, nowadays and age. When we talk a little bit later, we'll talk about how we didn't used to have social security numbers, or we didn't used to have death certificates, to fill out. It was the family Bible. And so, yeah, now everybody has so much information attached to them that it is and they want to know, they keep track of everything, and they want to know, who died of what. And well, that's kind of what that other slide was about, was there are so many components. The transportation industry takes into effect how many accidents were from intoxication, or how many people died from this type of accident, and then they build better seat belts, or, I'm brainstorming, but so many people derive information. What happens if they don't want to? I guess we try to find somebody else.
You're gonna have, I always just trust the families that we want this to be as complete as possible and as fast. So,
Age is not.
well, you need the birthday. Most likely, there's gonna be a birthday somewhere. You're gonna have some-
Situation.
Yeah, we've had
Whichever one has your social security.
that's how it goes back to whichever one we can pass with the social security. Yeah.
Emily, some of the discussion is really quiet
Oh.
on there. So as people ask questions, if you
Try
can
to
kind
repeat a little bit.
of
Okay.
summarize them.
I'm new to
That'd be
this
great.
whole facilitating thing.
Everyone's question except mine, I'm right in to
Yeah,
there.
okay.
That situation with my grandfather. He lied on his page to get into the SIGS WPA service a year early. And it continued on with his government methods when he joined the military. He was a social security card and this stuff. So that's what that actually was, two sons, but he was actually born a year later. And we always used to joke that it made it look like his parents' wedding was a shotgun wedding, because he would get
Oh.
24 days after the marriage, according to his birth certificate and death certificate, but it's actually a year and 24 days.
Well, see, and I have a relative who says he was born in about 4 different locations.
And who's to say which one's right? And that's part of what we'll talk about here in just a minute, is oftentimes what really did happen compared to what is on record are two different things, especially 100 years ago and later, or earlier, because they didn't have the technology that follows you around the way we do now. So there's that. So that this can be, he asked me to talk about it. I'm like, well, I can talk about what's on the death certificate. Once it gets into all that, but I did research, and there's all kinds of ways to find information.
So whenever you're considering the veracity of any information, you want to consider who the informant was, how well do they know the person, how well they know that this information is correct.
You could sit right here. I'll sit there. You could come tell all this. That's awesome. Well, see, that's the other thing. When you asked me to do this, I thought, well, I don't know anything about this. You guys could teach me. But okay. So the next information, let's see, the verification, we talked about that. So the Hispanic origin and race, the address, they always want to know if your residence was within city limits, and which county you lived in. If the decedent lived on a tribe or belonged to a tribe, and the length of time that they lived at the residence, their address when they passed. So they could be there 2 days, they could be there 48 years. They just want to know at that address, how long have you lived, and that the current address. Then they want to know, of course, the birth date and place, the father and mother's names. When it asks for the mother's name, it always wants the mother's maiden name, the one she was given at birth. Marital status, which gives clues then to if your ancestor that you're searching for passed before or after their spouse. If the spouse was still alive, then the spouse's name would be on the death certificate. So that always, there's a clue there for genealogy research. Huh? Yeah, yeah. With her maiden name, sorry, for people that didn't hear that. And then the occupation and industry, education, and whether or not they served in the military. Then it also wants to know the informant's name, relationship, and address. And then it also wants the funeral facility information. So the method and place of disposition, which is whether it will be cremated and what crematory will do that, or whether it'll be buried in what cemetery. Or if it filled out the other one the other day that was a ship out of state, and I had to know the state it was going to, the city, and then the name of the cemetery for that. And then that the death certificate and the burial transit permit will accompany that person to, whether it's ashes or the body, to that next state. I always feel like I'm the final address, address maker. I give them their final address when I'm doing the paperwork. So this is actually an image. It's a pretend, the information's pretend it's John Doe and, just stuff that's not true, but that is an image. So your death certificate will look like that. It's fancy. It's on fancy paper, green ink. It has a special certificate on the back. It's like a seal that's kind of holographic. It's kind of reddish and foily and makes it official. And it gets printed by the Vital Statistic. We get them from Snohomish County Vitals in Everett. They mail them to us.
That stays in your office.
Nope, that's ordered by the family. So the informant, the person who is giving us all this information, is free then to order as many copies as they think they'll need. And that varies if the person had a lot of investments, a lot of property and real estate, a lot of different bank accounts, a lot of life insurance policies. They would just need different ones. And every entity wants a different, like somebody just complained to me yesterday when they were picking them up. He had to get so many because everybody wants different ones. Some people can just have a copy. Some people just want to email to them. Other people want the real thing and they want 3 of them, So you never know, and it varies from each family because everybody is a person. It's all personal. So hopefully they'll have a good clue. We are also able. It's a lot easier for a funeral home to order the death certificates because we don't have to prove our identity to the state. So for up to the year from the date of death, we're able to order for the informant. So that next of kin, that person can call us and say, hey, I need 8 more. So from a year from the date of death, we're able to order for him or her and get those. After that, they would have to go up and then show their birth certificate, their ID, their, all the things they need to be able to obtain that certificate. So we do that that's a service we provide. We don't charge any extra than what they charge us. And it's just a nice way for them to be able to quickly get what they need to finish handling their affairs. Okay, moving on. Sorry. Go on and on about silly little things. So clues in the data. This is where it got kind of fun. And you guys, now it's where you guys can ask me questions and hope they'll know answers because, so in the name. So if we look at the name, sometimes an unknown middle initial or even a full middle name you didn't know might be revealed here. In the name of the parents, this is extremely useful if you didn't already know this information. It takes you back yet another generation in your research. Marital status, and I kind of touched on this before, marital status at the time of death. So if you were wondering whether an ancestor died before or after their spouse, this will tell you that as well. The informant, so it's a name, relationship, and current address of the person supplying the demographic information. It is usually a relative, but not always. And then we kind of need to talk about the accuracy of the informant. And, I want to say sometimes people who are grieving don't can't even, I know that their time spent with Beck's is a big blur. We're just helping them get through the steps that need to happen. And they're in shock and their whole life is different. And so we take a pride in that, and we're really good at helping people just get through these steps. And I love working with my coworkers because they care about helping people. But we all understand too that we're usually just a blur. We're the worst time in people's lives, and we're just helping them. And if we can make that as smooth as possible and they forget about us, that's great. But when they come in and they're grieving, sometimes they're not going to be able to remember. I've thought about it when I'm not grieving and when I'm just maybe overworked or tired or busy or not anything, just clueless, because that's sometimes what we are, and make 42 a 24. Or say that I think my dad was born in Corvallis, but maybe he was born in Salem. I don't remember. I'm going to say Salem. And they're grieving, and there's no way for us to know any different unless they bring in the birth certificates and all that. We can help them find the information, and we would. But we're relying on that informant. Sometimes informants can't handle the stress of it all and come in a little bit tipsy. And sometimes informants come in and they have dementia because, and this is another big, huge shock on their life. Sometimes an informant might be a minor child that is an older minor child, but wouldn't really think to know his parents' information like that. Or, there's just every situation is very different. And so we do need to take into consideration the informants. I'm just talking about present day. Now, if you want to think back to 100, 150 years, we can have a lot of fun thinking about what they would be into, not be able to remember, things. But, okay, so that are those things. Let's see what else. Oh, the occupation one was really fun to think about. So it tells you the occupation in the industry, whether they were a farmer, an accountant, or a coal miner, their choice of occupation probably defined at least a part of who they were as a person. Certain occupations, such as railroad workers, may have employment, pension, or occupational records available. So that might be somewhere, once you know their occupation from their death certificate. Oh, he worked in the railroad. Now I can go look up what union he was in, or look up, the history, or maybe I can find a picture of the train, or maybe I know the route, or maybe he helped build the railroad. Well, what states were those? You can dig into those kind of things. What was his life like? Maybe he I don't know anything about railroad building, but it can't be, I'm sure there was a camp and, little cities along the way. Who knows? I bet there's a big culture there to explore. So through old job records, you may learn who your ancestors' employer was and what their salary was. And that's kind of fun to think about the culture and where they lived, the city. If you go into period exploring as well as then what they did. So what was it like for a coal miner to live in this city during this year? Or what was it like for the big railroad tycoon to come through and fall in love with the coal miner's daughter? I have no idea, but there's things to think about, right? Then there's also, let's see, the date and place of birth. Information found in death records can often provide the clue you need to locate a birth or marriage record. Also, military service. You can, I guess, I have not explored this very much, but it looked like I could have spent a whole couple more days looking, that rabbit trail, because internet research always, you spend hours never finding the end of the internet. And, the rabbit trail of if they served in the military and they're a veteran, then you can go and look at all kinds of different things. And oh my gosh, then you can see where they served. And then you can get in a whole nother rabbit trail. So I can see how your hobby of genealogy and ancestry searching can be really fun. I felt it when I was learning about this. Okay, let's see here. This is probably just, does the death certificate give a date and place of birth, a clue to the parent's maiden name? It also, oh wait, I'm on the wrong one, sorry. It also may provide the first clue whether your ancestor may have traveled or moved over their lifetime. A look at death certificates for multiple relatives can reveal if there was a trend, like a family that spent generations in the same town. When you combine all of the tidbits of information with knowledge about where they live and what time and the time in which they lived, you may be able to acquire a deeper understanding of them. You may even spend some time considering how their work may have supported or impacted the immediate family or a larger community. So vital records can tell a family story. Then, now what? I just had to add him in because he's kind of cute. Missing data, but what if you can't find a death record? Or let's look at some reasons why you won't find a death record. And I think we touched on the first one of accuracy. Information is only as accurate as the person supplying it. Okay. So you may discover, for example, that the names of the parents are wrong or missing completely. The date of birth may be different from what you know it to be, like you were saying earlier, or you could discover a birth date you didn't even previously know. Sometimes, especially back when old records were literally the family Bible sitting in Great Aunt Josephine's parlor, word of mouth information is all one had to pass on. Imagine one consumed with grief, mixing up a number on a date or a city or a parent's maiden name. So we kind of already talked about that. Maiden names, that's the next little, that's a crazy creature. The more I looked into it, the more I thought, oh my word. So I have a half page of notes on that one. So researching female ancestors can be challenging since their surnames change at each marriage. That's hard enough. But what I'm talking about is that she might not be listed with her first name. Instead, her death record might be listed as Mrs. John Smith rather than Mary Ann Smith. Try searching using his first name instead of hers. And I thought that was like, I'd never thought about it, but then people do call because of course we get all clientele, but we have a larger number of older clientele and they do go by Mrs. John Smith. You know, that's just, and I remember being a kid and going to grandma's church and having, you know, Mrs. whatever Smith, you know, the husband's name. So I think that's a culture thing. And for the time period. And then these practices have also been known to change whether you're where in the world you are or where, what time period. So women in Germany may keep their maiden name, adopt their husband's surname, or choose a hyphenated version. And we've all maybe been privy to this aspect of Mexico, Spain, and Chile. Women haven't traditionally changed their surname after marriage, but their children often carry a hyphenated surname, one that combines the last name of the father and mother. So sometimes I have Hispanic friends that have 5 or 6 or 7 names, you know, and it's just because they're taking all these different names. So try putting that all on the death certificates. And I've had death certificates with lots of names on them. And then what about divorces and then multiple marriages? You know, people can be called all kinds of things. So it becomes vital when researching your ancestors to take into account the traditions of the culture of both the location and the time period being researched. And I already mentioned that time period intersection can be fun to explore when thinking about your ancestors' occupation. I think that sounds like fun. Okay, then the next one, there's initials. For some reason, there are men who seem to keep using their initials rather than their full names. This can trip us up when we do an online search. While some databases will match W.H. Skinner, if you search for William Henry Skinner, many will not. Try searching with his initials, first initial only, and again adding his middle initial instead of his full name, and maybe you'll come up with something. So these are just tips that I found online. I found from different websites, just kind of threw them all together. So why? Oh, us? Yes. I mean, we're supposed to, unless they just, we need to have their names. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really know that I've come across somebody that I have processed just initials for the middle name. And then I've also processed with no middle name, but I don't think I've ever processed. I've always had a first name.
Is that an issue with no middle name in any way?
With what?
Is it an issue by any stretch of the imagination having no middle name?
No. Okay. Nicknames. We're all good from there. Oh, I already said that though. Nicknames are troublesome, especially for women. While Williams generally aren't listed as Bill on their death records, although it does happen. It isn't unusual at all for women to be listed with a nickname or diminutive form of their name. Search for Molly or Polly for Mary, Patsy for Martha, or Peggy for Margaret. And I think somewhere, if you want to search online, you can go into there's some big list of nicknames for like the early 1900s, something, there's some big, and it's in the genealogy site. So I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. But when I clicked on it, it was being huge, and that was another rabbit hole I tried to keep myself contained because you go on and on forever. I never have anything to present. I just have lots of little weird stuff in my head. Okay, so ordering a death certificate. So we already talked about before the meeting, but I'll just kind of recap it real quick, is that each state and county, I mean, each state though for ordering has different rules on what you can order and what and who can order and how much they are. They all vary in price and they all vary in who can order. There are a lot of them cheaper, part of the handouts. So when we get the handouts, I'll talk about more about, there are other places that, you know, older death certificates are public record and are usually able to be found online. More recent ones, there's a statute of privacy, and I don't know that statute. I guess I should have looked that up. I didn't think I would even think about it. But they're so long that we can't go up and get so-and-so neighbor across the street who died last week's information without being related or having legal reason to do that. In this state of Washington. And so I also included in the packet that you'll get is how to order a death certificate from the state of Washington, because that's what we have. So I guess now would be the handout time. So let's do that. We have packets that, and I think the online people will get them available to them online.
When you're doing that, what are the requirements for an announcer? Can an informant be an announcer?
What could be,
It has to be, someone who's attending an event, it has to be a medical professional or the coroner. So if someone passes away at home and there's family members there, they need to call 911 and 911 will come out.
and I've had, when I had to ask the medical examiner one time for the time of death, they said, well, the 911 dispatch came in at this time and they had found them already this way. And so that was the time, and, you know, so they take all kinds of different, but we can say that person has passed, but until there's a medical person that says it. So I think there are certain trained nurses, like the hospice nurses can do it, you know, and that's really not a question that we just take the pronounced because they've already come to us that way, or the medical examiner tells us. Yeah. Okay, so the handout. So basically, let's see, the top one, I'll just kind of look through them with you real quick, but the genealogy, 25 alternate sources for death records. So what if there are no death records because I wanted to find a death record for somebody from the 1890 and they didn't even think about doing them till the 1900s, and until 1930, none of the states really had them all, you know, so they probably didn't exist. Now what? And because I don't really deal with anything but death records and this is not my hobby, I only had so long to do, I decided to just kind of find you guys some tools because I thought, oh, these are great ideas, but I didn't want to learn about them and teach them to you at this time in my life. And so I just thought giving you these resources and these kind of cool ideas to your attention would be kind of neat. So I'm not sure I can answer a lot of questions about these, but I just thought these were kind of cool. And so, and then the 24 ways to find ancestor death information. You know, it's not just a death certificate that has information. If you can find an old family Bible, or if you can look for a death notice or read an obituary, you can glean a lot of information that you wouldn't necessarily get with the death certificate. But the death certificate would also give you, oh, well, they died in Chicago, Illinois. I can go look at Chicago's newspaper for its obituary on that day now and find out more information. So I'm not saying death certificates are invaluable. They're very valuable to give you the clue to go look at this county's, you know, obituary to see if you can find more information, or that county's. One of the things I read was that older death certificates too, they would say that they'd been institutionalized when they were maybe in the state hospital and not in the jail. The jail would also be institutionalized. So they're just kind of different. Once you start reading about the period and the epic that you're studying about or researching, there's all kinds of different things to think about in those times. Death notices, I just kind of, another little article. I tried to give you kind of where I got it from if it didn't mention it already on there. And then here is the Washington State Death Certificate Online Genealogy, where I was talking about you can access most of everything up to, well, it says right here. Let's find the dates. July 1st, 1907 to December 31st, 1995. So that's how currently the most complete records are those prior to 1960, but they're daily inputting more. And so I guess the answer would be 1995 and backwards to 1907. Let's see, then the packet that's stapled with all kinds of papers are the how to order all of the vital forms from Snohomish County Vitals. That's who we work with.
Is any of that required that you submit something face to face?
You can do it all online as long as you can scan or upload your ID requirements that they, you know, the verification requirements that they ask. I've had to, in order to order death certificates from the state for on behalf of Beck's, I had to submit like my passport picture and have an email address that had my name along with Beck's name in it. And then I also had to have a letter from Amber stating that I am authorized to order death certificates. We had to order something outside of Snohomish County. I mean, you know, something else from Olympia. And so that was the verification. So I had to upload my passport picture and that. So it's usually things that are doable. It's just a matter of doing them, and people get all kinds of stressed out, you know, especially in our situation where they're grieving. That's just kind of another hassle. So it's actually a really cool way for the state to allow families to have us help them. But this is the vitals information for state of Washington. And then the last thing is the information for the death certificate. And this is the paper that I always get so excited about if we already have this, or if the family comes and they've had something like this, that we also email it to the family prior to them coming in and say, if you can, you know, this is the information we will require. And so a lot of families come with this filled out. But this is if you want to fill it out yourself, or it just shows you a good idea of what all, you know, all the pieces of information that keeps track, that gives us all about the percentages of people that'll catch flu this year, or that will die in a car accident, or that will have had a brain injury, and maybe they can track it to this type of slippery slope. You know, I don't know. I'm just coming up with that's how they keep us safe and protect us too, is from these numbers. So at this point, I think I've talked a lot. I feel like I've talked super fast. So do you have any questions that, yes?
I have one,
Okay.
and it follows up with someone in the chat, Barbara was asking about, and that had to do with, for you guys, the death certificate process, if someone is not local. And Barbara mentioned having to deal with overseas things. But I was thinking just other states. Is the death certificate done wherever? And it really should be then handed off to you guys completed. So someone died in Uruguay or Utah, doesn't much matter. How does that work? And the reverse, if somebody who's visiting here were to die, and I don't know how, when bodies are being transported, if they're first handled by a local facility, not just sent back directly from the hospitals.
So the state that the person in the United States, the state where the person passes is where the death certificate will be issued. And it usually starts by the county, you know, the county, but that's the state. So if someone passed in Arizona, but already had a cemetery plot up at Reslon at our cemetery, we've had that happen. And so we've actually had the family works with someone in Arizona, the facility, and we actually now have sister companies all around the United States, and that's really nice when we all are in the same system and can just, but the certificate is issued by that state. that also, remember, once it's issued, that becomes the transit permit. So the burial transit permit, which is also another name for the cremation certificate. We've talked about all that before, but that's how then that would accompany how the cremated remains or the body back to Washington and get buried at our facility. And so that burial transit permit says would be the final destination, would be such and such. Now on cremated remains, people can buy scattering tubes, and the state of Washington has legal places where it's okay to go scatter out in public, and up in there's just all kinds of places. Some places need permits, it depends, but there are a lot of places you can. And so the burial transit permit is just something that we also attach. When anybody buys an urn, we have that with the urn in case they want to take that, either take the urn with them and travel with it, or if they want to take and scatter and leave them somewhere, that will just get them on the airlines and any public transportation with that. Yes.
In the state of Washington, are bodies of water legal to dispense ashes?
3 miles out. Bodies of water like lakes and things.
Like streams, oceans?
I don't think the ocean, yes, 3 miles out, not when it's supposed to, it just depends what kind of public or private. If it's your own private grave, you
Public.
do not,
Public.
public, no, you're not supposed to. Unless you-
So the question was, can you scatter in the state of Washington in bodies of water? And we can scatter 3 miles out into the ocean. And other than that, in inland waters, the bodies of water are, no, we're not supposed to.
Was that up to 3 miles out or beyond 3
You
miles?
need to be 3 miles out.
Okay, it's beyond 3 miles and beyond.
But you can, like the ferries, right? I mean, but there's permits. So there's some areas that you can get a permit for, correct? Okay. So we have a list. I don't have that memorized either, but a list of things that are required for different places in Washington.
Most tribal lands you're not supposed to, because of religious.
Most tribal lands you're not supposed to because of religious reasons, is what somebody said here.
So I wanted to follow up with what my earlier,
Oh, yeah.
and then Barbara followed up. So if they have a transit permit and are buried in Washington, do they get a death certificate for burial here?
No,
They get a death certificate for burial here
if they died somewhere else.
if they died somewhere else.
No, you can't refile.
Okay, so they get the death certificate is where they died, and the transit just allows the body to be moved
Yeah.
back.
Produced at the place of death and accompanies the body.
Okay,
And that would be the final. So somebody passing here in Washington State that we're handling, I would put on there ship out of state as the disposition. It wants to know method of disposition. One of the methods is ship out of state or out of country. And to answer the question too about the country is each country requires different things. And so we always tell families, or we'll work with the consulate. It depends on if the family wants to do it or if they want us to work with it. But we'll find out, okay, what is it going to take legally? What are the requirements to get a body overseas or cremated remains overseas? And that depends. Many countries don't want this, but they want that. Or some of them, one country wanted a list from the county that said that it didn't have a disease and that the cremation, so I mean, there's all kinds of different things. And so we'd have to get something from the doctor, and we'd have to get something from just the different entities that they required. Saying that maybe, I don't know. I just know that there are different letters that we had to pursue for different cases for different countries. Did that answer that question?
yeah,
I
so she
forgot
just kind of
about that
followed up,
factor.
but so Washington accepts whatever, she used the example of Arkansas, does as transit. So
Right, so that's like a state, a nationwide, and
got it.
The death certificate process too in the 1953 date or something, and I'm remembering from memory, and I've read a lot of this stuff in the last few days, but there was a time when they had, it was more recent, it was like 2008 or something, they standardized all the death certificates nationwide to have the same components. They don't all look the same and they're not all placed in the same sections, but the information is all, we at least have to have the standard information. Washington can say, oh, we want to know if they were also on a tribe. And so they'll have that on there where Florida might not have that, you know, so that's just state specific. And that's okay too, as long as we have the nation standards. Okay, so then did I answer your question fully? Did you ask me something and I forgot? I kind of interrupted myself going back to the travel thing. Was I stuck on something else or are we good now? Okay, next. Just stop there. I didn't want to forget somebody. We good? Okay, thank you guys. That was very educational to present to you tonight. I learned a lot.
Well, fantastic. I'll jump back in here, and we had a nice turnout on the Zoom call, and I want to thank everybody who joined us. That was great, and Emily and Amber, so appreciate you being here. A lot of good information. Where is Rest Lawn? You mentioned that. I'm trying to think of.
You know where the park is over by Woodway?
Oh,
Yeah, it's right next to the park.
didn't that used to be called something else, or has it been Rest Lawn?
The restaurant for as long as I know. I don't know.
How long do you know?
50s or-
Okay, okay. Yeah, so right by Sherwood and all of that. Okay, okay. Well, very good. Okay, well, thank you again, everyone on the Zoom call. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. Check the calendar at the website. We'll be having another presentation. I don't have all the details, but a friend of one of our members has done some extensive research on her Italian family, and that will be the first Wednesday in November. So please feel free to join us then. And again, check out the website for all the details. And we'll conclude the Zoom call. Thank you.